Point Blank was directed by John Boorman, who began his career in his native England working as a documentary director for BBC Television. In 1965, his first feature was released, a film about the British pop band the Dave Clark Five, which was known in America under the title Having a Wild Weekend. Point Blank brought him to Hollywood for the first time, and he and Lee Marvin had such a positive experience working together that they quickly teamed up again to make Boorman's next Hollywood film, Hell in the Pacific. Throughout his career, Boorman has continued to make movies in the U.S. and Europe. He earned 2 Academy Award nominations for his thriller Deliverance from 1972, starring Jon Voight, Burt Reynolds, and Ned Beatty, and he earned 3 additional nominations for producing, writing, and directing 1987's Hope and Glory, an autobiographical movie about growing up on the British home front during World War II.
Escape for 5 nights on the TCM Classic Cruise, November 12th to the 17th aboard the Disney Dream.
How far off the diving board do you want me to jump?
To Grand Cayman and Disney's Castaway Cay with legends Chevy Chase, Richard Dreyfuss, Lainie Kazan, Dina Martin, Pat Boone, Bob Mackey, Sean Young, plus TCM's 5 hosts. Book your stateroom today. Visit tcmcruise.com or call 1-877-223-7030.
I want...
What?
I want us to love each other.
In 1971, my dad, Sidney Pollack, and Robert Redford were finishing up on a film called Jeremiah Johnson. Somewhere in that time, Ray Stark, who was a prominent producer, sent my dad a 50-page treatment written by Arthur Lawrence, and it was called The Way We Were. Barbra Streisand was attached to play Katie. About halfway through reading the treatment, my dad fell in love with it. He could absolutely see the film that he wanted to make. And he couldn't think of better casting than Redford and Streisand. The problem was, and it was a big problem, he didn't have Redford. Ray Stark and the studio were putting enormous pressure on my dad to move on and pick another actor. But my dad couldn't picture anybody else playing Hubble Gardner. Determined to get Redford, my dad started with this letter. Redford, Jesus, don't read this now. I have visions of you 3 days behind schedule, not sleeping, arguing with Warners, fighting the rain, and in a generally very receptive and happy mood to get a letter about a whole new project. Anyway, a couple of thoughts before you finish reading. Lawrence is really a playwright, not a novelist. What he's got, I think, is a really wonderful story of 2 very good people played against an interesting canvas in a fun and romantic period.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Do you smile all the time?
No.
Katie is pretty much self-explanatory. She's a flawed heroine. She's excessive and difficult, but she's a good lady, always on the right side, and deeply committed.
What's cooking in the Kremlin, Katie?
The Kremlin is worried about the civil war in Spain, are you?
Hubble is not a cop-out or a weak guy. Hubble sees all sides of the argument and therefore cannot take the extreme positions that Katie does.
You make fun of everything. You think politics is a joke.
Well, you make fun of politicians. What else can you do, though?
Hubble's arguments with her are always intelligent and pragmatic.
The president died, and it just didn't happen to you. Everything in the world that happens does not happen to you personally.
These 2 people love each other deeply and yet do not end up together. And it's not because of any political or social issue. It's less definite, but much more true and heartbreaking than that.
I don't think we're gonna make it, Katie.
When it came to The Way We Were, my dad wanted to tell a story about 2 people who loved each other very much, but were finally so different at the core, they just couldn't be together.
You want to end it nicely like a gentleman you have, so go on, go, get out!
The political and social areas should only be background, but as background, it is fascinating and really never been dealt with. The whole McCarthy thing can be a great asset if it's handled unpretentiously and unpreachy.
Those men are fighting for your right to make any kind of picture you want.
I don't have to say anything about the period. You love it as much as I. You've also seen Streisand as much as I, so I don't have to say much about her. She's unbelievably good in The Right Thing, and it's been such a long time since you've had any help outside of Butch.
Are you really so sure of everything you're so sure of?
Sure.
There is something about the combination of you 2 that has immediate sparks.
Do you know you're beautiful?
We've both talked about doing a love story. I knew by the time I was halfway through it that this was the one, because it is off. It is not conventional, not the expected kind of story of romance. The people are not black and white, they are complicated. They have flaws and rough edges, and that makes it for me much more interesting. If I knew you less well and we weren't friends, I wouldn't sell so hard. I'd probably play it very cool, but I'm too excited about this possibility not to push. For me, it's that very rare combination of good and commercial. And just to show you how dirty I can play when I want something, I will drop in the fact that you can get your salary on it. For God, country, and Sundance. All best, Pollock. I really loved reading this letter. It reminded me so much of how smart and intuitive and instinctual my dad was about the kind of movies that he wanted to make. My dad and Bob went on to make more films together. Some of those included 3 Days of the Condor, Electric Horseman, and of course, Out of Africa. But I think some of the fondest memories my dad has and some of the most sentimental feelings he has about making a movie were on The Way We Were.
Katie, you expect so much.
Oh, but look what I've got.
My dad and Bob were big, beautiful souls who had a real kinship forged in the trenches of making movies together. They were true mavericks in their personal lives and in their movie life. They didn't work together much in the later years, but the last year my dad was sick, Bob would come and sit for hours with him. And I'm not sure what they talked about, but I'm sure it was interesting.
Major Reisman. You are ordered by Allied command to select 12 general prisoners, convicted by courts-martial and sentenced to be executed or serve lengthy prison terms for murder, rape, robbery, and other crimes of violence. And you will deliver them secretly behind enemy lines in France to undertake a mission of sabotage that could change the course of the war. The 12 men will be known as the Dirty Dozen.
Lee Marvin as Major John Reisman.
There's a little of Major Reisman in every man, says Marvin. Tough and unyielding, yet compassionate. I think it's the best role I've ever been asked to play.
You've all volunteered for a mission which gives you just 3 ways to go. Either you can foul up in training and be shipped back here for immediate execution of sentence, or you can foul up in combat, in which case I will personally blow your brains out, or you can do as you're told, in which case you might just get by.
Now, you hold it right there. This war was not started for your private gratification, and you can be damn sure that this army isn't being run for your personal convenience either.
Ernest Borgnine as General Warden.
I'm tired of seeing generals portrayed as desk-bound pen pushers, says Borgnine. So I've played Warden as a rough professional soldier.
Robert Ryan as Colonel Everett Dasher Breed.
There were officers like Breed, says Ryan, who could never suffer the rules broken or even bend a little.
Major Reisman's compliments, sir. You prefer to be captured or destroyed?
Jimmy Brown as Napoleon Jefferson.
Jefferson is any man fighting for recognition against the odds, says Brown. I think I understand him pretty well.
The hell is this?
John Cassavetes as Victor Franco.
Says Cassavetes. Franco is a petty hoodlum forced to heroism by circumstances beyond his control.
We go on that mission, we all get killed. That's what they want. That's what they want.
Trini Lopez as Jimenez.
He's crawling with hate.
Charles Bronson as Vladislaw.
The last guy in the world you'd expect to be a hero.
Telly Savalas as Archer Maggot.
Maggot is a maniac, says Savalas. His religious fanaticism can never be moderated or quelled. It is a constant danger.
Clint Walker as Samson Posey.
An Indian with war paint smeared on his soul. Train them. Excite them. Arm them.
And turn them loose on the Nazi High Command.
mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
Virgil, that's a funny name for a boy that comes from Philadelphia. What do they call you up there?
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
There's something going on here that nobody is talking about.
I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm no girl, I'm a woman.
We must work together. We must find a common solution to a common problem.
Burst down those closet doors once and for all and stand up and start to fight.
For what it's worth, I love you.
I was thinking about appointing you to take his case.
Now that he's been charged, that's what I intend to do.
Don't miss To Kill a Mockingbird in select cinemas November 13th and 16th, featuring exclusive insights from TCM's Ben Mankiewicz.
You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view.
Gee Louise, stand up. Your father's passing.
Available now on disc and digital, and for more information, visit fathomevents.com.
I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Welcome to TCM. Every Saturday and Sunday night in November, we'll be taking a look at movies which help to shape the culture. And we begin tonight with a couple of good ones, movies that undoubtedly made an impact. Joining me is a frequent guest at TCM and a good friend of mine, historian, writer, film essayist. I made that term up right here on the spot. Donald Bogle. Donald, how are you?
I'm fine, Ben. Good to see you.
Donald, our first film tonight is from 1932. I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. No question, this movie had a significant cultural impact, yes?
Tremendous impact. You know, some of the films that are being shown in this series, and Fugitive is definitely one of them, introduced audiences to a world that the audience didn't know anything about and was totally unexpecting of seeing. And Fugitive does that, and I think it really altered the consciousness of the audience after people left the film. And my feeling about it in terms of the impact that it had at the time it was released was that same year, 32, earlier in April of 32, Muni had starred in Scarface. Here he played this gangster who was ruthless, who was cutthroat, who was a real threat to American society. And I think when audiences heard about this film that came out in November of 32, that Muni was in it, I think they were expecting to see another gangster film, especially since Fugitive is in the title. And I think that that just became a surprise when the audience actually saw the film. Because the Muni character here, James Allen is his name, is basically an innocent man and a man with great talents and skills who finds himself really innocently put on a chain gang. It is still rather frightening to see the world that's in Fugitive, that here we find men who are chained together, men who work at hard labor. There is just no relief. And so audiences going to a movie maybe expecting to see Paul Muni as the outlaw saw him instead as this basically innocent man in a system over which he really has no control whatsoever. And most people didn't know about the chain gangs. And that's the other thing.
Unless, a friend or a relative saw a Fugitive and told you to go see it, there was a good chance, as you say, you were going in expecting Paul Muni to be in a gangster movie. It's got Fugitive right there in the title, suggests a guy on the run. But it turns out to be something else, and which increases the possibility of a movie really leading to societal, at least awareness and maybe change that's so much harder now. This movie did raise awareness about the conditions in chain gangs across the American South.
Very much so. It's a frightening world. And I think that with the film, for audiences seeing it, the impact was that basically the fugitive, he's not a fugitive. He's an innocent. He has no choice but to get away from this world that is so cruel and that just limits him in so many ways. And I think that the audience at that time, to see it and to learn about the chain gangs, to see how they operated, I think that the audience was just roused to feel that something's got to be done about this. And there was so much discussion about it and the chain gangs in the South. And this is based on a true story by Robert Elliott Burns. These were experiences he had endured on a Georgia chain gang. So there was that as well. And eventually it did change it. Eventually there were the chain gangs were outlawed. And a new kind of system came in. You know, there's also something else, Ben, that I find interesting about this film, which Mervyn LeRoy did. And that is, in actuality, there were a disproportionate number of Blacks on the chain gangs. And we see in here, there is a sequence when we see the Black prisoners sitting ready to go out on a work detail, and their faces are forlorn, and there's a hopelessness there. And then there's also a sequence where we see a board with a number of men who will go out and work. And again, there are far more Negroes listed to do the work tale than the whites. So this also is coming into it and gives the audience something to think about, even though that part of the film is not elaborated on. But, you know, the NAACP did pay attention to this film, and later they did help to defend a Black man who had escaped from a chain gang. And there was another, the International Labor Defense, pledged to help those who had escaped from the chain gangs. So it just was a real awakening. And even today, we feel that way. I've seen this film a number of times, but each time I'm sort of horrified by it. So it's really a startling film.
Yeah, I agree. The ending, very powerful, very, very memorable. We'll talk more about it after the film, including the more details on the true story, which is as riveting as the film you're about to see. Donald, thanks very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Here it is from Warner Brothers in 1932, Paul Muni in I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang.